Hey guys, I'm going to make a video here for you on how to do some custom stuff on the dash. This is the 12.3 Holley dash, and all these principles also stay the same for the 7-inch dash. So a couple people have been asking me how to, reconfigure boost to read something else or TPS to read something else, or how to do switches on the dash to activate, say, a fan or a water pump. And then I'll also show you how I do timing retards on here to help get down the racetrack. So let's get into it. So the first thing is these dashes have all got some pre-canned displays already in them, and some of these are kind of redundant. Some of them, if you don't like them, I'm going to show you how to change them and how to start from scratch, and then also how to add all this stuff in. So the first thing is if you find a screen that you like, but there's a couple things in here that you don't necessarily need, I'm going to give you a run through on how to change this stuff. So click on the dash somewhere and go to menu. When you go to menu, a couple boxes are going to pop up. We're going to want customize. So hit customize. It's going to tell you you're about to screw this up. Just hit OK. So say this car doesn't have air fuel right in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on AFR right, and we're going to hit customize. So this box populates, and this tab right here on the right hand side is the sensor from the ECU that it is monitoring. Okay, so hit that. And let's change that to something a little bit more relevant for whatever we're doing. You could just hold this button down and scroll. There is a ton of stuff in here. It depends on how many inputs and outputs you're using. Advanced tables, yada yada. But we're going to pick trans temp and hit OK. So this is trans temp. That's going to be on here, but we need to change the label, right? So we don't need it to say trans temp input number 6, so we can click on it and hit back and then hit OK. So you can also change the font size 15. Typically whatever they have populated for font size is pretty accurate for whatever gauge you're working with if you're modifying it. Hit OK. So units needs to be changed. Right now it's A/F. What we can do is change this, or we can clear it, and now it doesn't say anything. It just says trans temp, so we know if it's in Fahrenheit or whatever. So now we have a range. So the trans temp gauge that's in, or the trans temp sending unit that's in this car starts, I believe, at 80 degrees. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It starts at 40 degrees. So 40 is our low, and maximum is 300, I believe. Hit OK. So now we have a scale, a range here in this little gauge from 40 to 300. We could set up warnings. So right now there's no warnings, right? But we can do a low alarm. We don't really care about that. Let's do a high alarm. Click it and just key in a value, right? So say the high alarm is going to be 200. Hit OK. And then you can change your warning color. So we'll do a low alarm, even though we don't care about it. We're going to do a low alarm so I can show you a change here. So a low warning, let's make the low warning 40 degrees. And we can make a steady warning color, or we can flash slow or flash quickly. So we'll do slow flash, hit OK. You can change colors here, foreground color. There's a ton of stuff here with colors that you can do. Bar background. So if you want the bar background, instead of it being blue, you want it red, hit OK. And notice it changed the bar background to red over here from blue. And then if you want more precision, right? So, or less precision. If you don't want it to read, 58.2 degrees, you just want it to be 58, you can set this precision to 1 as opposed to 1 point, you know, something. So hit OK. Minor ticks are your hash marks here. So if we change the minor ticks to, say, 5, now we've got a couple, right? So, or we'll have a couple when we load it. And we have 2 segments. We can make this 5 segments. Now we see this here, so you got lines here. So you can change, you know, so that you know, hey, once it's up to this bar right here, it's normal. You know, your normal transmission temperature. So there's a ton of stuff that you could do here to modify each gauge, right? So, but this is how you play with it. If you want to increase the size, this is something that's actually that's easy to increase the size. So that's how many pixels. Notice it just got real big, but it slid off the screen, right? So we'll show you how to move it. Hit OK. Now, click it again, hit move. Now when you click this, you're going to click and hold it, and we're going to drag it to there. So now we got trans temp, it's huge, we can see it, right? So that's how you modify an existing gauge, or, you know, a value that's being displayed. Now, if you want to add something, right? So let's add some switches to do some things here. So we can just click this, we'll go to add, we're going to go to switch. And later in this video, I'm going to show you how, you know, how this works when you set it up in your ECU, but we're going to enable this and we're going to make this switch number 1. So virtual switch number 1, we can make it a slider, a rocker, a black toggle. So we'll leave it a slider switch. Or actually, we'll make it a rocker switch, right? Hit OK. And then we can do a inactive label color of yellow and an active label color of red. And hit OK. So now here's our virtual switch. It's down here in the corner. It doesn't make sense, so we got to move it, right? So click on it, move, hold it, and let's put it here. Obviously this layout is not, I'm not going to keep this, but this is just for demonstration. So virtual switch 1. So when we're driving down the road, we're not going to know what virtual switch 1 is. We're not going to remember. So let's just click it. Again, we'll hit customize, and let's change that label, all right? So virtual switch 1, we're going to do this fan. Hit OK. So now, that's our fan switch. Let's add a timing retard as well. All right. So I'm going to show you later in this video on how to set up the timing retard and the fan switch, so that if you're driving down the road and you want to hit the fan, turn it on, turn it off, or if you watch a whole bunch of people knocking the tires off on the starting line, you can activate a timing retard. So same thing we just did, right? We're going to add a switch, but this time we're going to make it switch number 2. Okay. And we're going to change this to retard 1. Hit OK. Now, this is a slider switch, so it's a little bit different. Remember, the first one we used was a rocker. There's toggle, there's a silver toggle, but this is a slider, so we'll leave it a slider. Hit OK. We're not going to change the colors. There you go. Now it's kind of overlapping here, so we're going to click, move, and let's drag her all over there. So now we've got 2 switches on this screen, right? So we're going to come up here, come over here, hit anywhere on the screen that doesn't have something, hit save. All right, so now we've got these switches. So now if we press them, fan's on. Remember how we made it yellow and red? All right, there you go. Retard on, retard off. Retard on, retard off. Okay? So let's say you add switches. And then I'm going to show you what we do with those switches, where you don't have to actually physically wire anything to the ECU for an input. You'll still have to wire an output to turn on a fan. but you don't have to do anything physical wiring for timing retard. So we've got some switches. Now we know how to, resize things, repurpose them. If you wanted to add, what we'll do is we'll go menu, customize, hit OK. Let's add a gauge. So if we wanted to see duty cycle, it's going to ask you, what do you want? What kind of gauge do you want, right? Do you want an analog, a bar graph, a digital, yada, yada. So why don't we do a analog gauge? Notice it looks just like the other analog gauges that are there. So if this is too big, if you want to move it, it's just the way the way I just showed you. So you could, click here, hold it, drag it here, and then you can, customize it if you want. If you don't like it, get rid of it. So we've got switches, we've got gauges, we know how to modify all this stuff. How do we make it a layout on our own? How do we change this layout? So say we don't, we'll hit save, say we don't like this one, right? I don't like this. So let's go menu, customize, hit OK. I don't like this layout, so I'm going to go to layout, clear. Now we got nothing. All right, so it's a clean slate. Layout, whoops, import. So now it brings you, this is where you can kind of get fancy and do some custom stuff. If you plug a USB flash drive into here, right, and a little thing sticking out, you'll have another list under here under device, and it'll be for external. So you can grab a picture if you want off of your USB flash drive of whatever, your kids, your dog, your wife, whatever, the car, and you could use it as a background. But what we're going to do is we're just going to go into the defaults. We're going to notice that there's a lot of defaults loaded by Holley already. So there's only 10 different screens on here, but they've given you quite a few options on, what to pick. So let's go to this one. No, I know what that one is. So let's go to Skull One and hit import. Look at that. Now we've got a layout that they've already kind of pre-canned for us, and if we wanted to modify it, we could, just like we just talked about. But that's how you replace one of those that you don't like. Hit save. Now we've got, another style that we actually like, and then we can modify them all from there. So hopefully that explains how to physically do it on the dash, and the rest of it we'll get into in the software in the ECU. So just overview, you'd go menu, customize, hit OK, and then whatever screen you were on when you hit customize is what's going to populate. So now if I didn't want to modify this screen, I'm going to have to hit save. I'm going to have to go to a screen that I do want to modify. Okay, so you just slide to whatever you want, then go to menu, and then go to customize. So you'll only be able to customize what you were just on. So you can't want to customize a different screen and go in it from this screen. So you only modify one screen, at a time. And you can discard all your changes and then save. So if you did modify something but you fat fingered it and said, no, I don't really like that, you can discard everything and change it back to the way it was. So just hit save, and now we're back into, see, look, there's another timing retard. There's the toggle switch. That's the silver toggle switch. That's what that looks like. But that's how you do it on the actual dash. As far as, like, this is like just hold on, I'll find it right there. There's like a 3-minute attempt at, just making a custom one. So I just made this picture in photo editing software, and then, you size it and you make it fit. I don't want to get into that. There's some guys out there that do some killer work with this. Ryan McCain's one of them. He does some awesome stuff to actually make you a custom background that fits with your pictures, and so you can hit him up if you want to do that. But as far as the pre-canned stuff that's in here, I think I've covered it all. So let's go take a look at the software on the computer and make our changes. And now we need to make them do something in the software. So what we're going to do is a couple different things. So the first thing you need to do is create the actual input. So we go to our I/O ICF individual configurable folder, and first it'll populate your inputs, right? So we're going to create some inputs. So we go to inputs over here where we got some space. These are all full on mine. So we're over here. Anyway, so we're going to call this one virtual switch 1. We'll call this one virtual switch fan. All right, so virtual SW fan. So we're going to make this turn on a fan. So we're going to enable this input. We're just going to call it a ground for now. And then we're going to make another virtual switch, and we're going to call this one virtual retard 1. Okay? Enable that as well, and we'll call this one a ground as well. So we need somewhere to pin map this. Now just leave it a ground. Go to your pin map. It's going to populate here, but you don't have to worry about that. Go to View LCD and virtual switch fan. Remember how we picked our switch number before? We picked switch 1. Well, that was for our timing retard. So we're going to put virtual switch fan under switch number 2 and virtual retard switch number 1. So now the ECU has a reference when you hit that switch. Okay? So what we need to do, the first thing we'll do is we'll work on a fan. So we need to be able to output a signal from the ECU, letting the device know that it should be turned on. Okay, so just like a regular switch panel, so you should be triggering a relay. If it's a fan, I would suggest a pretty large relay, depending on the size of the fan, amperage draw and whatnot. So size it accordingly. But what we need to do now is create an output. Okay, so we're going to do the fan first, and then we'll get to the timing retard. So hit done here, go to outputs, and let's go and create a virtual fan out. We're going to enable it. Here's where you'll decide if you're going to pulse the fan, if you've got a relay that's capable of being pulsed to start the fan up. But for this application, let's just do a standard triggering a relay to turn on a fan. So we'll make it a ground, hit OK. We're going to configure it. So here's your switched input trigger. 1, this output will activate when, let's find it here, virtual switch fan is enabled. Okay, so that's it. You go back to your pin map, you view outputs, and here's your output, right? So you're going to run a wire from the ECU, you'll find a ground output, and you'll grab it and just drop it here, B10. So, or wherever you've got some space. I'm kind of limited on ground outputs. In fact, I got one left. So there you go. Virtual fan out. So B10, you'd run a wire from B10 to the activation lead for your relay to turn on your fan. So that's how you do a virtual switch for a fan. Again, you have to create an input and an output, and you're not physically running a wire from one port from an input into an output, but what you're doing is you're strictly using one wire out of the ECU to trigger a relay to turn on your fan. So when you press that button on the dash, it is turning on your fan. So let's go into the timing retard. Now, go back to the input. Remember, we've got virtual retard 1. It's a ground. So we've already pin mapped it, view LCD. There it is, switch 1. That's what we named it on the screen. Switch 1, so virtual retard. So we have an input. So there's a few different ways to do this, but I'm going to show you the way I like to do this, okay? So for a timing retard, go to your advanced ICF. For anybody watching, if you don't have these individual configurable folders, I'll just give you a quick rundown here how to add them. You go to Toolbox and then Add Individual Config. What we're working with is Advanced, so double-click Advanced. And some of you have asked about front versus rear wheel speed and whatnot. There's actually demo tables from a while ago that have it in there, so you can view it here. But I was just load default, and now you'll have this icon populate. This ICF will populate right here. So now we're in the advanced ICF. We're going to use a 1D table. So we want to use a timing offset, right? So we want to, so say we're strapped in the car and we're a little leery about what the track is going to hold. We don't know if our tune-up's going to hold or not. So we're going to create a timing retard. So when we press that button on the dash, that virtual switch on the dash, right, we're going to enable this table. So let's do, we turn this on, enable table. Let's name it, right? So we can do retard 1. Right. The table type is going to be an offset. Okay. And then the x-axis, I typically use as boost time. So what that is that, you know, from the release of the trans brake. So the switched enable, this table will activate when, and there it is, virtual retard 1, right here, is enabled, okay? And you can also do an advanced enable. So this table will enable or will activate when, you know, if you wanted a different, a secondary enable. But we don't need that here with this. So virtual retard 1 is enabled. Now, we're obviously not going to be in the throttle for 99 seconds. So, you know, your typical hot, greasy day at the racetrack, you can typically get all the power in by 2 seconds, right? So let's make the last block 3 seconds. Okay, now we've got a nice trend here. 0 seconds, so this is right at the release, all the way out to 3 seconds. So this is a timing offset, so we're going to be removing, right? So and again, you can make like 5 of these, it doesn't really matter. So you could have 5 buttons on the dash that will remove timing more aggressively or less aggressively. So what we'll do is let's remove, so minus 10 degrees here at 0 seconds, and we're going to ramp it all back in by 1.8, right? So the easiest way to do that, if we want to do it linearly, we would just left click here at 1.8, hold it, and drag over here to minus 10, and then right click and hit fill row values. So there we go, we've got a nice smooth 10 degrees out on the hit, and then it ramps back in at 1.8. Now, that setup right there is not me telling you this is what you should load in your car and it's going to go down the racetrack. This is something that you have to use your better judgment with. This was just a generic demo. So I don't need messages saying, hey man, I used your timing retard and it didn't go down the racetrack. There's a billion and one variables that go into that, and you know, if you're racing, you should know that. So this is just an example. Depending on the car, the tire, and all that kind of stuff, these numbers are going to be modified dramatically. So with some of the stuff that I tune, typically just being able to get it to hold, you know, hit the tire, hold it, I've got all the timing back in at like 0.4 to 0.6. So it's just that initial shock. So that is one way to do your timing retard. So to recap, you know, you've got retard 1. It's pinned right here. It's coming from your digital dash, going to your ECU, and then your ECU is doing its thing once that switch is on. Okay. Now, the reason why we're using boost time is because boost time is at 0 at the release of the trans brake. So Hopefully that makes sense. And to recap on the switch for the fan, where did I put it? Right here. Virtual fan out, right? Again, virtual switch fan is enabled, right? So when you press that button on your dash, it is enabled. The other thing that you can do here, if to save you running wire, is you can hit OR, sensor input 1. This output will activate when, because it's a fan, right? Coolant temp sensor is above 150 degrees. And we deactivate it at, say, 130. So when either or of these conditions are met, it will activate that output. So, you got one wire going to one relay to turn on one fan, and you can either manually have an override with your dash, or you can have an automated output, to trigger that relay based off of the coolant temperature. So hopefully that explains everything on doing virtual switches and a little bit of info on how to set up your dash to do what you want and how you want it. So hopefully it helped. Let me know. Thanks.